Good morning. I'm Ann Ball, Program Director at Maine Development Foundation, overseeing the Maine Downtown Center. Thank you for all joining us in our Zoom room this morning. I hope you have a good cup of coffee. Maybe you got a mug in the mail. And I'm happy that you're here with us this morning for our Maine Downtown Center Annual Awards and Celebration. I'm going to check, Joanna, have we started the recording? And I just want to say I'm really glad to be here with you this morning. I want to thank our sponsors, which we could not do this work without them. We will be engaging the chat this morning. If you have questions, comments, or want to cheer or say hello. And we are going to dive right in this morning. We couldn't do our work at the Maine Downtown Center without our wonderful advisory council. It is a group, a cross-section of wonderful professionals that help us and guide our work at the Maine Downtown Center. And we also couldn't do our work without our amazing team at the Maine Development Foundation, many of whom you interact with every day. And I thought about doing a traditional report out, and I decided that it would be much more fun to do a kickoff with 20 highlights of 2020. And our goal this morning is to share a little bit of reflection, to celebrate 3 awards, and to kick off 2021 with some inspiration for you. So without further ado, I'm going to dive into this presentation. Okay. And they're in no particular order, so enjoy. We had 1 in-person Downtown Institute in Belfast in March. We have 2 wonderful graduate assistants in Discover Downtown Westbrook and in Friends of Woodford's Corner, both from the University of Southern Maine. We have 3 entrepreneurial pilot projects, Lisbon, Munson, and Skowhegan, and we have 25 Main Street and affiliates that have continued to pivot and persevere this year in 2020. 5 AmeriCorps Fellows, who I hope are with us today, Perry, Carolyn, Nat, Maggie, and Sam. We awarded 6 Revitalize Me grants in our downtowns, Johnson Hall, Eastport Public Library, the Norway Opera House, Bigelow Brewing in Skowhegan, and the Chocolate Church in Bath. We have 1 Superstar Maine Downtown Center team. We have numerous philanthropic and individual, corporate, statewide, governmental partners that help us do our work at the Downtown Center. We have had 9 in-person Main Street assessments. Somehow we squeezed those in January and February in 2020. We have too many to count examples of pivoting and adapting. We had 11 Maine Downtown Center newsletters, which was exciting. This is my favorite slide. The best volunteers that do their day jobs while attending meetings. We had someone snow plowing in December while attending one of our entrepreneurial meetings. And then in a meeting in Westbrook, we had James from the Frog and Turtle prepping the kitchen as he was attending the meeting, a downtown restaurant owner, Frog and Turtle. We had too many to count virtual meetings. We have 14 advisory council members who guided us, 500 plus hours of technical assistance to communities all over the state, to our main streets, to our affiliates, and more. We had advocacy at the federal level, including our first ever Main Street and affiliate federal delegation call. And number 17 is a repeat. 18, we have an amazing mainstreetmaine.org project, a collaborative marketing project of our 10 Main Streets that has continued to grow with new followers. And we have partnered with Build Maine and the New Hampshire Housing to bring small scale developers workshop to Maine virtually. And then we had over 20 optional Friday Zoom calls, each one attended by 20 to 40 people each time. It's something that we started during the pandemic, but it's going to stick because we like it and it seems to be a great way to connect. So now we are going to move on to our awards, which is very exciting. So as I said, we have 3 awards this year. First, I would like to thank our awards committee, consisting of advisory council members Abby Levin, Jane Palmer, Haley Yamillo, and Mac Collins. And I would also like to acknowledge Kyle Randall, who's an artist based in Portland who created paintings for our awards that we will show you slides of. And now I would like to hand it over to Haley, an advisory council member who also works at the Maine Department of Transportation, and she will present our first award.
Hello, everybody. Artistic, outgoing, passionate, and unabashedly kind, Mackenzie Caford began volunteering for Main Street Skowhegan in 2016 at the Skowhegan Craft Brew Festival. In 2019, she took on more of a leadership role and joined the Community Engagement Committee and then became a member of the Board of Directors. During that time, she pitched the idea of reframing the annual Holiday Stroll event with a Whoville Grinch theme and then spearheaded that effort, taking on almost all of the workload herself. This included 120 volunteer hours crafting, painting wooden signs, Whoville houses, and more. Mackenzie's vision for an updated holiday event brought new people to downtown and boosted sponsorships and exposure for Main Street Skowhegan. Mackenzie stood out to the award committee for a number of reasons. She may have started out as one of the many Brewfest volunteers, but she has become a leader. She took initiative, took on responsibility without being asked, and paid attention to details and quality, all while showcasing downtown Skowhegan. Mackenzie is also relatively young, as she is in her 20s, and she is clearly committed to service in her community. Lastly, Mackenzie works at the Bankery, a long-time downtown business, and she is an entrepreneur herself, having started Crown and Root, a business all based in her artwork. She understands the value of innovation and the Main Street program to downtown Skowhegan. For all these reasons and many more, we want to honor Mackenzie Caford as the 2020 MDC Downtown Hero.
Yay! Thank you, Haley. Mackenzie, I'd love to have you join us on screen. I've put up a copy of your wonderful hand-painted award, which I don't think you've seen because maybe yours hasn't arrived yet. But thank you, and we'd love to have you say a few words.
Thank you so much, Anne. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can, and we know you're at the Bankery right now.
Okay, perfect. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for, of course, the award, but also the kind words that you've said about me. I try to be all of those things every single day. And it's such an honor because that award could have gone to so many people in our community. There are a ton of individuals that are really trying to make things happen for Skowhegan and everywhere around. Main Street Skowhegan is basically a model organization to volunteer for. There's just, I mean, if you're starting out as a volunteer, it can be kind of nerve-wracking, and they just make it fun and easy and exciting, and you just want to help. So I will always give my time and heart to anything that is helping our community.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for those gracious and very humble words. It was a well-deserved award, and we're so excited to be able to honor you in this way in the whole state of Maine. And you'll see lots of comments in the chat acknowledging all your hard work. So thank you. And thanks, Haley, for making that presentation. So now we are going to move on to our next award, which is the Downtown Project of the Year. And I am going to turn it over to Scott Burke, who is a Maine Downtown Center Advisory Council member and also the owner of a downtown business in Norway, Maine called Cafe Nomad. So Scott, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. About to touch on one of my favorite subjects, ice cream. So the 2020 MDC Downtown Project is the Saco Scoop. The Saco Scoop is a first of its kind ice cream shop that serves as a needed community hub and revenue generator for Saco Main Street and is located in the 1912 Atkinson building. The Scoop began as a community ice cream shop in June of 2018 to provide a much needed gathering space for community members to easily linger, cross paths, and connect. The Scoop was founded with a combination of a donation of some ice cream equipment, a retail space opening, and the vision of Saco Main Street's executive director. Saco Biddeford Savings provided a line of credit to proceed with startup costs, and magic started to happen with the hard work and support of Main Street. The goal of the Saco Scoop is to attract more visitors to downtown, promote local businesses, and sustain the programming of Saco Main Street. In the first year, the Saco Scoop attracted more than 32,000 guests and served over 750 four-legged friends at the doggy walk-up window. Ice cream is provided by a local Maine company, Shake Pond. The Scoop has created one full-time and more than 11 part-time jobs for the community and is a vibrant hub of activity. Special events have included story time at the Scoop, special celebrations, game nights, birthday parties, and more. During COVID, services have been moved to an outdoor pickup, providing a much-needed safe outing for families and friends. The award committee wanted to honor the Saco Scoop for practicing the Main Street 4-point approach on a daily basis and practicing what they preach while becoming a community hub that provides ongoing support to the Saco Main Street organization. So congratulations to the Saco Scoop and Saco Main Street for being named the 2020 MDC project.
Yay. Thank you, Scott. And we are joined this morning live from the Scoop with Rob Biggs, Director of Saco Main Street, and Stefan Normantes, who's the outgoing president of Saco Main Street. So Rob, I'm going to put up a copy of your award. Again, another painting by Kyle Randall from Portland. And Rob and Stefa, we would love to have you say a few words.
Well, I guess I'll start out real quickly. I want to thank the Maine Development Foundation, obviously, and the Maine Downtown Center for the recognition. Sometimes during all the craziness, when things aren't moving as fast as you want them to do, it's things like this that kind of remind you how far you've actually come. I want to thank the Saco Main Street Board of Directors. Without the board putting up with my crazy ideas and believing some of them, things like the Saco Scoop could not have happened. And specifically need to call out outgoing president and my great friend, Stefan Normantes, for the countless hours that she's put into helping make this happen. And finally, got to thank my wife, Susan, and daughters, Ripley and Jordan, who put up with this, as well as many hours of scooping at the Saco Scoop and coming up with ideas to help make it succeed. The Scoop is everything that I hoped it could be. It's a happy place for folks who enter the door, because this is not the DMV. As community gathering place, it's been a spark for our downtown. It's become a bit of an institution already for Saco. The other night, a couple came in and said we couldn't not let our friends leave back to Pennsylvania without stopping by the Scoop. It's been a place of celebration for birthdays, anniversaries, graduations. A place memories are made and friends get together. It's been a bright spot for all ages, from 2 years old to 80, 90 years old. There's a couple of folks that walk over from a home behind us that are in their 90s to celebrate their birthday. It's supported countless fundraisers and raffles within the community. And in addition to selling smiles, we support the Maine State Prison Industries program as their largest retailer of their products, as well as many local crafters and makers. Our focus has always been Maine made. As Scott mentioned, we've created 11 part-time jobs and 1 full-time. It's been a great training spot for many high school students who have gone on to other jobs since. We've grown significantly year over year, and it's continued to grow this year. And we should be able to finally, after 2 years of breaking even, donate a significant sum to Saco Main Street. And with that, I want to thank the Development Foundation again and the Maine Downtown Center. for highlighting the Saco Scoop and what we do here. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you, Stefa. Thank you, Rob. And I just want to add that the Saco Scoop and Saco Main Street had been selected through a competitive process to present at the National Main Street Conference about this concept and this work, which, as I said, really does live and breathe the 4-point approach. Unfortunately, the conference was not held, but we hope to keep spreading the good word of this good work that you guys are doing in Saco. So congratulations. So now I would like to invite Greg Paxton to join me on camera. This is actually Greg Paxton, the soon to be retired Executive Director of Maine Preservation and our Maine Downtown Center Advisory Council. So congratulations to you, Greg, as a sidebar, and thank you for your work in the historic preservation field here in Maine for the last 12 years. And now I'd like to turn it over to you to present our Innovation Award.
Thank you, Anne, and morning, everybody. Congratulations to all our winners this morning. The City of Bath went above and beyond in the summer of 2020 to support its downtown merchants and property owners. The expanded sidewalks for safe social distancing and fast-track permits for alfresco dining and the creation of parklets. The city more than doubled the seating downtown, which was essential to help both dine-in restaurants and takeaway restaurants, and the downtown buzzed with activity all summer. However, winter was coming. A cooperative agreement between the City of Bath, Main Street Bath, Union and Company, and Saginaw Real Estate Association came together to create an indoor park. Bath Ironworks became a sponsor of the project for the entire winter, covering utility, Wi-Fi, and rent costs in exchange for having a perfect place to interview some of their potentially thousands of job applicants in a safe and socially distanced way. A bonus is that job applicants have an opportunity to see and spend time in Bath's historic downtown rather than interviewing in a hotel outside of downtown. A group of volunteers cleaned, painted, and refreshed the Grant Building, which had formerly housed a department store. The city allocated funds for regular cleaning. Volunteers from Main Street Bath open the building in the morning, lock the building at night, and check in to make sure that sanitizing supplies are stocked and the area is kept clean. Air infiltration systems, high ceilings, and plenty of space for picnic tables and chairs make it an inviting space. Use of this indoor park is based in part on the honor system. Everyone is asked to clean their hands upon entering, wear masks, and social distance while in the building. It's popular with folks eating a takeaway lunch, grabbing a coffee with a friend, or simply waiting their turn to enter a store. The awards committee really valued how quickly this concept came together, the diverse group of partners involved, and the push to develop a winter COVID-safe space, and I might add, a community approach to COVID safety. Congratulations to Beacon Park and the many partners it took to make this project happen in downtown Bath. We'd like to acknowledge City of Bath, Main Street Bath, Union and Company, and Saginaw Real Estate Association, and Bath Ironworks for the 2020 MDC Innovation Award.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, so much. Lots of comments in the chat. Again, congratulating our awardees, and joining me on camera, we have Amanda McDaniel, Director of Main Street Bath, and we have Sean Ireland and Manny D. Reynolds from Union and Company. And Sean, I'd love to hand it over you to say hello. And you guys are at Union, and you are at Union and Company this morning in downtown Bath.
We are. We're coming to you live from Union and Company, our Bath's first co-working space. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to accept this award on behalf of our community and the project partners. Greg, thank you for that great introduction and explanation, and for all the work that you've done over the years to support our historic downtowns. It'll be greatly missed. Beacon Park is a great example of a public-private municipal partnership coming together to execute an innovative response to COVID pandemic. Like so many other communities, the pandemic has had an enormous impact on our community. It's significantly impacted our local economy. It's changed the nature of our mostly small-scale family-run businesses located in our historic downtown district. And at times it's left our community members and residents feeling isolated and distanced, and sometimes alone. Beacon Park is both a symbolic and a highly functional response to the COVID pandemic. The name is a nod to our storied shipbuilding heritage and a reminder that by staying apart and coming together during this time, we will ultimately rise up out of this pandemic stronger than ever before. I wish I could say that it took a lot of work and time and energy to bring this group together, and that I could take all the credit for making it happen, but it didn't, and I can't. We've done this kind of thing before in Bath, and we'll do it again. It's part of what makes this a really special place to live and work. I'd like to thank specifically our project partners, the City of Bath. Leadership starts at the top with Peter O, and our manager, and Mark Myers, our assistant city manager, who led the way. We got the fire folks, police, life safety, code in there quickly to identify any issues, picked up the cleaning services to make sure that we had a clean and safe space. Like to thank Main Street Bath, Amanda McDaniel, Executive Director, really operationalized the initiative with volunteers and her keen sense of organizational management. Like to really thank Saginaw Real Estate Association that has a legacy here in Bath that has been transitioning over the last couple of years, and John Morse. John was there from day one, committing to the project, the building, and making improvements and making it a priority in an otherwise busy time. Like to thank my partner, Mandy Reynolds at Union & Co. for really supporting the concept and doing a lot of project management startup from the beginning. And then of course, Bath Iron Works and their talent acquisition and marketing team, who without them, this would have been a very different situation. So thank you for the opportunity to accept this award. We're honored, and we hope that the success of this innovative initiative inspires more opportunity for collaboration and innovation in our great little city and across the great state of Maine. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Those were great comments. I loved what you said about staying apart and staying together. And it was great to have Bath Iron Works be using this space for interviewing candidates. As Greg had mentioned, I love that a large employer is valuing downtown, because it's a huge asset to those large employers. And it's nice to see Mandy on the screen. Hi, Mandy and Amanda. Amanda, did you want to add anything before I close out?
Just a small thing. When I interviewed for this position, I said, I love everything to do with the artist Norman Rockwell and how his American dream had a lot to do with everybody taking care of each other. And that community sense of opening your door, even in your home, you need a meal, you need a cup of coffee, come in and sit down. And that was really the spirit that this whole park came together with. Every single one of us said, we need to open, we need to bring people in, and we need to take care of each other during this time. So the spirit was really what drove this, and that humanitarian aspect was so inspiring to see come together.
That's great. Thank you for those added words. And thank you and congratulations to that great team in Bath. I love the collaborative nature of this project. So thank you. So we are going to move on to a special information about our Main Street Fellows. So high impact and heartwarming is how I describe this program, and the fact that the Maine Downtown Center is so lucky to have a Main Street Fellows program. We thought it would be wonderful to hear directly from our MDC Fellows who have been working in Maine downtowns since September as part of their AmeriCorps year of service. So thank you to Maine Downtown Center fellow Nat Blackford for putting this video together. I have a couple steps to get this up on the board, so bear with me. Okay. I think we're ready to roll.
Last year, we all had to do more with less, and just when we needed each other more than ever, we needed to stay the furthest apart. Luckily, we were able to launch the Main Street Fellows AmeriCorps program with help from our friends at Volunteer Maine. The Main Street Fellows are focused on helping our Main Streets create a more resilient future by building more social capital and becoming more welcoming and equitable places. Let's get to know our inaugural group of 2020 Fellows.
Hi, my name is Perry Williams, and I'm serving Gardner, Maine as a Main Street Fellow.
This is my home in West Virginia, where I just graduated from WVU with my master's in public administration.
Hello, my name is Nat Blackford, and I'm a Main Street Fellow at the Maine Downtown Center. I grew up in Edgecombe in Mid-Coast, Maine, where I live now. I went away to school in Vermont, where I studied anthropology and environmental studies. But I've been back for a few years doing environmental education and energy efficiency. Most recently, I completed a graduate certificate in mapping and geographic information systems, or GIS, at the University of Southern Maine.
Hello everyone, my name is Sam Perry and I am the Main Street Fellow in Biddeford, and my host site organization is Heart of Biddeford, and I'm currently working with them on community building, engagement, and equity.
Hi, I'm Maggie Hirschland. I am the fellow at Rockland Main Street, and it's great to meet you all virtually. I'm from Needham, Massachusetts, and just graduated this past May with degrees in public policy and youth and social innovation from the University of Virginia. I have previous experience in youth and education and social policy, as well as researching the role of anchor institutions in communities, and previous experience working with the city government with Boston City Councilor Andrea Campbell this past summer.
My job as a fellow is to engage and build those relationships with Gardner residents, businesses, and organizations. Without large events and public gatherings, creating connections can be difficult.
Some of my ongoing projects as a fellow include a social media-based storytelling campaign highlighting business owners and service providers within Gardner's downtown. These posts record personal accounts of owning and operating a business during the pandemic, reminding viewers of their own connections with small businesses and the people that keep the doors open. This campaign has been extremely successful in engaging the wider community and driving shoppers into the downtown for holiday shopping. This will, of course, continue post-holiday season. You can find these posts on Facebook or Instagram with the hashtag ThinkGardnerFirst. Another project I'm working on is reigniting Main Street's volunteer engagement and onboarding process. The fundamental pieces needed for volunteer recruitment and management already exist, but they've been underutilized in recent years, resulting in a lack of diversity in the organization's volunteer base. One major change that's happening during the pandemic is having to go from events-based volunteerism to getting people in regularly to help with small projects. Currently, I'm working on creating these type of positions that fit within our organization's needs, as well as making it easier to volunteer with us.
The main goals in my position at Rockland Main Street center around increasing social capital of residents in Rockland, increasing our community outreach and engagement efforts, as well as making downtown Rockland more equitable, inclusive, and welcoming space. A few key projects in my service plan to help accomplish these goals include helping host a public engagement community conversation around the topic of how to make Rockland a more welcoming community, helping update our volunteer systems by creating new volunteer intake and hour tracking forms, as well as creating a volunteer handbook and guide, using the Thorndike Loop to have a placemaking capstone project with youth, collecting data through surveys, interviews, and listening sessions to get a better idea and understanding of the current gaps in community engagement, as well as potential opportunities and partnerships going forward, particularly with youth as a key lens. Through this youth engagement lens, the key project that I have been working on is increasing Rockland Main Street's engagement and outreach to youth and youth stakeholders downtown.
At the Maine Downtown Center, I have a statewide focus, but I'm working on 3 main projects. The first is related to pandemic response and recovery. So I'm sorting through all the data that the Downtown Center has gathered on how communities have been and still are responding to the pandemic. So this involves looking for lessons learned, best practices, and projects that really did a good job at building resiliency and advancing equity. The second project that I'm working on is designing and building out the members area on the Maine Downtown Center website. This is a central repository for relevant information in case studies, guides, podcasts, and templates that deal with issues that Main Street communities often ask for information on. It'll also be a spot, like a clearinghouse for data, local data on Main Streets. This is like reinvestment data, the annual salary survey, municipal contributions, etc. The third project I'm working on is setting up a process to do short projects in Main Street and affiliate communities around the state. So these will be short 2 to 6 week projects that build resilience and advance equity. And we're currently working on the RFP for that. But we're excited to get that out to the communities, and I'm excited to be out working in the field in the different communities across Maine.
So one of the overarching goals of my service plan is to expand our reach by engaging communities who previously may not have engaged with our organization. And the main way I'm currently doing that, as things have been adapted due to COVID, is I am running a comprehensive 5-part social media campaign. And I'm hoping to run it at least until the beginning of June and possibly reassess and alter then. Other things I'm working on in addressing equity are I am going to be meeting with someone from the Biddeford Adult Ed in the coming weeks to discuss different methods of engagement and outreach. And at the same time, I'm working with someone in the school district on getting more materials translated. Currently, most of the materials in the Biddeford School District that are available in English. Many of them are also available in Arabic, but there are other languages that they don't necessarily have the means or have been able, or for whatever reason, haven't translated into those languages. So I'm working with someone in the school system on securing grants and resources so families of these more niche languages could have access to these same resources. In addition, we are hosting a sock and pantry drive on Martin Luther King Jr. Day to help address other inequities in the community, and what's collected from the drive will benefit 4 local organizations. And yeah, this has been a lot of creativity and finding different ways to engage people that are both COVID safe and also focus on addressing inequities in the community.
Hi everyone, this is Christina Cannon from Main Street Skowhegan. And we're in the process of actually looking for a couple of Main Street fellows and recruiting them to the Skowhegan community to help out with a project that we're calling Scale Up Skowhegan, which is an initiative derived from our Skowhegan strategic plan that will encourage business growth, strengthen the entrepreneurial ecosystem, bolster community pride, and encourage boomerangers and new residents to call Skowhegan home.
Thanks everyone for sharing what you're up to. Here's to community and resilience in 2021.
We are going to move on to our keynote address. I hope that you will sit back with, again, your cup of coffee or tea and enjoy a conversation between Maine Downtown Center Program Director Adam Burke and our keynote, Stacy Mitchell. There is plenty of time for audience questions. And again, you can put them in the chat at any time. We will be monitoring that. And so with that, I would like to introduce Stacy. Stacy Mitchell is the co-director of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, which produces research and develops policy to counter corporate control and build thriving, equitable communities. Does that language sound so familiar to our fellows program? Stacy has written extensively about the importance of independent businesses, the value of thriving local commercial districts, and the dangers of growing concentration of corporate power. Her articles and reports have influenced lawmakers, journalists, and advocates. Her work has appeared in The Atlantic, Bloomberg, The Nation, and The New York Times. And she's the author of a book, Big Box Swindle, and several in-depth reports, including Monopoly Power and the Decline of Small Business and Amazon's Stranglehold. Stacy has helped numerous communities adopt policies that strengthen and spur local business development while limiting the reach of corporate chains. In 2019, she testified before Congress about Amazon's outsized market power and impact. In addition to her work at ILSR, Stacy serves on the board for the Maine Center for Economic Policy. We are lucky that she also lives right here in Portland, Maine. Adam, I'm going to have you and Stacy take it away, and I look forward to hearing their conversation.
Hi, Stacy. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. Good morning, and good morning to everyone. I'm blown away by everything that's happening in Maine's downtowns.
Pretty exciting stuff even during these really difficult times, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's been 8 years since we've been on stage together when you gave your TEDx Dirigo talk about we can't shop our way to a better economy. So it's a pleasure to be with you here again. I know it's good to be in community with you. I'm just wondering if you could get us grounded a little bit more specifically in what the Institute for Local Self-Reliance does.
Yeah, absolutely. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we are a national research and advocacy organization. And our idea of local self-reliance is really the idea that people should be able to exercise power over their lives, shape the future of their communities. You know, in a nutshell, that we have a vibrant democracy that really is rooted in place and in connections to one another. That's our vision. And we think that one of the biggest threats to that vision is concentrated corporate power. We're really concerned about the fact that in many sectors of our economy, we have a small number of corporations that are really dominant, that we are losing local economic systems, and that those big companies have a lot of power over our government, and that they're weakening the community fabric. So to combat that, we focus on two different things. One is that we work on changing policy to check corporate power and to really rein in and break up this concentration that we see. And then at the same time, we do a lot of work to lift up and promote strategies and policies at the local level that can rebuild local businesses, community banks. We do a lot of work helping cities build municipally owned high-speed broadband networks, local renewable power. So we work in both directions, sort of challenging the big and then lifting up and promoting the small. And so we're a relatively small organization. We're about 22 people, and we work nationally. We're spread all over the place. We have a lot of staff in Minneapolis. We have a Washington, D.C. office, and then a very small office here in Portland.
And could you say more about what you do there?
Yeah, I'm the co-executive director, so I share the executive director seat, and then I also run our independent business initiative. So we're organized into these program areas. We have an energy program and a broadband area and so on. And I run the independent business initiative. So we're a small team of folks who focus on independent small businesses. That team includes Kennedy Smith, that many folks on this call might know, who joined us about a year ago and used to be the national director of the National Main Street Center, and of course is a huge leader in this field. So we're absolutely delighted to be working with her and have her at the Institute. And our team with the Independent Business Program, we do a number of different things. We do a lot of work on sort of local level policy and approaches that communities can use. So for example, we've done some really groundbreaking research on dollar stores and the impact that they're having, the ways that they're driving growing number of food deserts and undermining local grocers. And then we've developed a set of policies that communities across the country have been implementing to address that and to try to rebuild local food retail systems. We've done work on rising rents, another big issue that affects independent businesses in cities like Portland and all across the country. So we do a policy work on that. You know, the past year, of course, a lot of our focus at the local level has been helping to create resources and models and policy ideas that communities can use to address the fallout of COVID and try to get through this crisis. So we do local stuff, and then we also do federal work. So in the fall, I put together a federal policy brief for the incoming Biden administration and the new Congress around, like, what does the federal government need to do to strengthen small business and local economies, and have done some meetings with the transition team, and have been involved in helping to shape some recommendations around the Small Business Administration and ways that we should change it. And then lastly, I think a big area of focus for me in recent years has been really sounding the alarm about concentrated power, and in particular, Amazon. I have done research on Amazon for many, many years, and several years ago really became deeply concerned because it felt like they were sort of reaching their tentacles into all different parts of our economy, but sort of invisibly. I mean, everyone knew what Amazon was, but there was not a lot of reporting or focus on the company or a real sense of how far it was going and the kind of implications of it. And so we really stepped up our work on Amazon and have done a number of significant research reports on it. And as Anne mentioned, testified before Congress last year and have been working to kind of rally people nationally to the idea that we need to revive our anti-monopoly policies and that Amazon really should be one of the first targets of that work.
Well, we're all better for it. So thank you for all that work. I'm a sci-fi geek of sorts. And so when I hear what you do, I feel like we're kind of in the matrix, and like I see one version of reality, but you see all the code and the strings and what else is kind of programming that reality that I'm interacting with while I drive around. So thanks for all that you do and for your superpower of analysis and advocacy.
Oh, thank you. That's a really nice thing to say. A nice way to put it. I'll take that.
So from your unique super-powered vantage point, what did you see happening on Main streets and for local businesses over the last year through the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is a community that obviously knows the story even better than I do. I mean, you know, we can use words like unprecedented and catastrophic to describe what has been going on. The data I've seen says that overall small business revenue nationally is down by about 1/3. This has never happened in history. Never just had that sort of drop off. Recessions are bad, but they're not like that. I think that we've lost more than 400,000 independent small businesses. And of course, businesses owned by people of color have been especially hard hit for a variety of reasons. And so, like so much of this pandemic, COVID has really just laid bare and turbocharged a lot of the inequalities in our economy and just made them worse. I'm somewhat hopeful that in sort of revealing them, that it has maybe created some new impetus to actually address them. You know, we'll see going forward if that happens. You know, back in March, we pulled together a set of allied organizations to really push around federal relief for independent businesses, and called for, you know, direct funding through the Treasury, through IRS, just inject cash to create a bridge, you know, while businesses had to be closed or were going through these substantial changes. We didn't get that, though we did get forgivable loans, which, you know, have been a mixed bag, but, you know, at least something. And, you know, but sort of disappointing in the sense that the federal policy response was much more robust for large companies and more flimsy for our local economies. And so again, sort of seeing policy kind of tip the scales, you know, against Main streets, against small businesses. So that's really concerning. You know, but at the same time, what has been so striking about this year, and you know, we saw this in the awards just now, and some of the work that the fellows talked about, is just how, you know, it has been a great example of how resilient and creative and adaptable communities are and local businesses are. You know, that there is some advantage to smallness and localness, you know, not, you know, just all the ways in which businesses have pivoted and altered what they're doing. I've just been amazed at, things like, in Colorado, reading about a pottery studio that, can obviously no longer host classes. And so instead has a model where they're delivering lumps of clay to people with, online videos for different projects so you can do them at home. A hardware store in North Carolina that's doing, virtual home repair. There are all these businesses that are using Facebook to do kind of curated video shopping through their stores. I mean, just, on and on. And the mutual aid has been amazing. Businesses that are stepping up to help their communities, making meals for frontline workers, and everything that we've seen, and also the mutual support among business owners. There are a number of cities now where restaurants have gotten together and created cooperatively owned delivery businesses so that they're not dependent on having to pay the high fees of DoorDash and the other big companies, but are doing it together for one another to support the whole restaurant sector. We've seen grocery stores carrying prepared meals from restaurants. So all of this evidence of why community matters and sort of the innate resilience at that local level, I think, has been really, really important. I will just sort of note and sort of close it just noting that we did a nice report called Safeguarding Small Businesses During the Pandemic, 26 Strategies for Local Leaders, which documented some of these things that we were seeing on the ground that seemed to be working. And we organized that report into first, the most immediate things places need to do, next, and later. And we're sort of now moving into the later stage. So, part of what I'm keeping an eye on, and I think people need to keep an eye on, is what are the key things during recovery? And I think, ongoing surveying and monitoring of businesses to sort of understand exactly what the needs are and how they're changing as we move into this sort of next phase of where we are, thinking a lot about capital and the importance of community banks and making sure that we've got affordable loan capital for businesses to grow and for new businesses to get started in the spaces created. And the other thing I'm really interested in is property ownership. I'm worried on the one hand that, especially in Portland, that we're going to have these private equity firms that are going to swoop in distressed properties and buy them up, and we're going to have lots of chain stores and that kind of thing. At the same time, interest rates are really low, and so there is an interesting opportunity to help support businesses buying their buildings or community groups buying property, like community land trust model around commercial development. So some things that are on my mind as we move into this year.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I'm picking up a few things you're putting down and hearing both your concerns and thinking about the examples of where there's hope for more resilient ways forward, particularly on the property ownership, and thinking of, there was a Bayside development that just opened here in Portland that I think is a pretty good example from somebody who's been part of Bayside for decades. And that's focused, it has units for people that have experienced homelessness, and it's focused on the creative class, things like that. But then there's great local developers that are involved in Biddeford and Skowhegan with projects that, are just moving. And then there was the cooperative and land trust that just got a project here in Portland, right? I think over in the former ball field and school property that had to be demolished over by the four-leaf clover. But yeah, lots to get into there. I want to pick up on what you said about loss, because obviously this past year has been a tremendous amount of loss, and it's a little bit crazy for me to hear that number, 400,000 small businesses lost, knowing that it's also the number of lives that have been lost up to this point due to COVID-19. And there's just been an extraordinary amount of grief that I don't even think we're in terms of that first, next, and later, we're still probably in the first phase of even reckoning with that level of grief. But also, when we were talking before this call, you mentioned something that was really interesting to me, is that something about, when we lose a local store, when we lose a local business, that there's kind of a conditioning that we've learned to write off that visceral feeling of grief that we have, that we lost that. Well, that's, that's natural. That's how capitalism works, sort of thinking. And I'm just Could you bring us back into that? I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I think this is, when we see a local business close, like when an independent pharmacy shuts down or a community bank is gobbled up and disappears, or local grocer goes out of business, or a local farm, when we see that, we're sort of conditioned to imagine that there's something inevitable about this, that small and local is just sort of inherently not as effective or efficient, that the big guys outperform, and that we might be nostalgic about these losses, but really it's kind of the price of progress, and we just sort of have to accept it. And I think we as a society are really steeped in this idea that bigger is better, that bigger outperforms. And it's such a powerful idea that has really dominated thinking in America for several decades now. It's such a powerful idea that it distorts our ability to see clearly. It functions as an ideology that shapes how we see things. And I think if we can step back, especially in this moment when there is really new attention to the importance of independent businesses and to healthy local economies, if we can really step back and try to see the world with fresh eyes, we discover that these notions about bigness are not actually always the case, and often are not. We've been furnished just in the last couple of weeks with a really interesting kind of glaring example of this that is so glaring that people kind of can't ignore it, which is that as the federal government has been trying to get vaccines out to the states and into people's arms, there's been some variation at the state level to how much vaccination there's been. So nationally, about 55% of the vaccine that has been distributed has actually gotten into people's arms. And in most states are right around that 55%. There's a little bit of variation. In Maine, we're at 58%, right? But that's about where everybody is, except that there are a few outliers that are total outliers. So North Dakota, 87% of vaccine in people's arms. West Virginia, 84%. Big differences, right? And so the question is like, well, why is that? And it turns out that the federal government negotiated with CVS and Walgreens as part of the national plan. They would be doing some of the initial vaccinations at nursing homes and care facilities across the country. Well, it turns out that North Dakota and West Virginia opted out of the federal plan and said, we're going to do it with independent local pharmacies instead. And that has turned out to be far more effective, that those pharmacies were able to jump in. They had relationships with the nursing homes. They have done a much better and faster job of actually delivering those vaccines. And there's been a bunch of a lot of national news outlets have been reporting on this in the last week or so. And a lot of it's kind of this gobsmacked, like dumbfounded, like West Virginia, how are they ahead of, places, how is it that, old timey drugstores in West Virginia, or, that kind of thing, sort of surprise at rural places and surprise at small business being better. But for me and for people who kind of study some of this stuff, it's no surprise at all. I mean, in fact, it's not just during vaccine rollouts that independent pharmacies are better. They are hands down better all the time. We know that they have significantly lower prices, according to Consumer Reports and others. They have faster service. They spend more time with patients. They deliver better healthcare advice. They do more screenings. 70% of independent pharmacies offer free home delivery. Most chains do not. So, you name the metric, they are actually better than CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, everybody else who operates a pharmacy. And you can take that, we've done that same kind of analysis in a lot of different parts of the economy and kind of found the same thing. I mean, community banks are another example, like local small banks. They have lower fees, better interest rates, and they also do a much better job of financing the real economy. They direct more of their assets to loans that go to job creating local businesses versus the big banks, which do very little actual productive lending, for a variety of reasons. So again, by a lot of measures, local banks are just superior. They do a better job at what we need banks to be doing. Broadband, the fastest best, cheapest, fastest broadband in the country are small networks run by cooperatives and municipalities. It's not Spectrum and the other big companies that are in the lead there. So again, we're so steeped in that idea that it's hard to see these things, but there are, once you sort of take off the blinders and go looking around, there are lots of examples in which small and local enterprises outperform or deliver really distinct and important benefits that their big competitors can't match.
Wow, it's good to hear that the data is lining up with both a Maine ethic and a Main Street ethic, that local and independent does it better. It's the way to go. That's really encouraging to hear, and that's also the flip of the story that we've told, as you pointed out. So if it's not necessarily true that our local businesses are not efficient like big businesses are supposed to be, and that our communities are in fact pretty resilient, why does it feel like we're still losing ground, heading into a year into the pandemic here?
Yeah, it's this is the question, like if independent pharmacies are out competing, why are they disappearing? Why are they actually losing ground to CVS and Walgreens, right? That's the big question. And indeed, we are losing independent pharmacies. There are a growing number of places that are pharmacy deserts now, like food deserts, and it tends to be rural places, including some parts of Maine, and urban neighborhoods that are predominantly African American. Those are the places where we've really seen this pretty extreme. We've lost a lot of local banks. There are 1 out of every 3 local banks that was operating 10 years ago is no longer here. Lots of counties now lack local banks across the country. So again, like if these small and local enterprises outperform, why are they disappearing? And the answer that we've concluded in our research is that public policy is in a variety of ways functioning to undermine small local enterprise and to shift the economy more to large corporations. So to talk about how that plays out in the pharmacy sector, just to be specific, there are these companies, they're called pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. And they are like the most powerful companies in the healthcare system that you've never heard of, But PBMs, what they do is your insurance company hires them to manage your prescription benefits. They decide which drugs are covered. They decide what, when a pharmacy dispenses that drug under your insurance, how much that pharmacy is paid, and so on. There are 3 PBMs that control about 80% of the market nationally. All 3 of those PBMs own their own mail order pharmacy. So think about that for a minute. You've got companies that decide who gets paid what, who are actually competing with the pharmacies that depend on it. And so in fact, PBMs are steering customers to their own mail order, and they're underpaying, under reimbursing independent pharmacies. The largest PBM is CVS, which of course owns the nation's largest chain of drugstores. CVS has been reimbursing pharmacies actually in some cases below the cost that the pharmacy is paying for the drug, meaning they're losing money when they dispense that drug. And in some states, CVS has then been sending letters to those pharmacies and saying, gosh, we know it's really hard to be an independent pharmacy these days. Would you like to sell your business to CVS? I mean, this is just, when you look at this on its face, any reasonable person is like, this is totally anti-competitive. This is a set of giant companies, not competing on the merits, but using their market power to push out their smaller rivals. And we have antitrust laws that prohibit this, but we've stopped enforcing them. We've altered how we interpret them in ways where there are just rampant market power abuses. What I just described with pharmacies is something we see in one industry after another. And once as we've documented in a lot of our work, you start looking around and you discover that this is, it's the antitrust laws, it's the way that our banking policy favors the big banks and in effect subsidizes them and makes it harder for local banks to exist. It's the way our agriculture, the Farm Bill channels the vast majority of its subsidies to very large farms, not to smaller farms, and on and on. And not just at the federal level, at the state level, Maine, we give tax breaks to Walmart, every year. They have sort of special tax access. At the local level, there are lots of ways in which land use and economic development policies often favor the big guys at the expense of the small. So, this is really, we've tilted the playing field, and we're getting exactly the outcome we've designed policy for. And the trick, I think, right now is to actually see that, instead of having the sort of assumption that the reason small is disappearing is because it can't compete. And so, this is really kind of the focus of our work, is how do you illuminate those policy dynamics and those larger structures, and then how do you advocate effectively for changing them?
You got me on a seesaw at this point, Stacy. I've been going back and forth between main streets and downtowns are the vanguard of American democracy. Yeah, we're doing it, to oh my gosh, corporate control is strangling us and making it impossible to succeed in some way. So please bring the light back in. What are some opportunities this year that you know of that we can take advantage of, or we can get behind, or we can implement?
So I think I feel more optimistic now than I have really ever since I've been doing this work. I've been doing this for about 20 years. And the reason is that there are a lot more people seeing this now. And we're seeing new academic research, new journalism, policymakers are looking at this. There's just really been a lot of sort of eye-opening, if you will, in the last few years. One of the areas that I'm spending a lot of time right now, and I really hope that the Maine downtown community will get involved in the coming year, because I think we have a really important opportunity, is around antitrust policy. We have very strong laws that we implemented, around 100 years ago, a series of laws that are designed to disperse economic power and ensure that small and mid-sized businesses have an equal shot, and that we have economic vitality across the country, and that we don't have concentrations of power that threaten democracy. That is the purposes of our antitrust laws. We have very good laws, and they're all still on the books. But in the 1970s and 80s, there was a kind of shift in thinking, and those laws were reinterpreted by the enforcement agencies and by the courts in such a way that we really just turned them on their head, and they no longer function the way that they're supposed to. And I won't go too far down the road of explaining all of that, but there is now a very strong movement afoot to reinvigorate those laws, and I think would be one of the most effective things that we could do for restoring local economic vitality, and not always being in the position that I feel like we have been in the last 25 years of fighting a kind of uphill battle against these larger structures that are always sort of coming down at us. Where this has been playing out has been particularly in Congress. So over the last 15 months, the House Antitrust Subcommittee had conducted this really in-depth, comprehensive investigation, looking particularly at the dominant digital platforms, meaning Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple. But through that lens, looking at how antitrust policy has gone wrong. And the report that they produced, they gathered millions of documents and testimony and witnesses, hundreds and hundreds of interviews and so on. It's a very in-depth piece of work. They released the report in October. It's about 500 pages. It found that Amazon, quote, has monopoly power and has engaged in extensive anti-competitive conduct, and details exactly how that's happening. And then the committee goes on to call for legislation to address monopoly power across the economy and to restore a fair playing field for independent businesses, including by breaking up and regulating Amazon. So I'm really encouraged. We haven't talked too much about Amazon, but I think it's one of the biggest threats that we face, and is really a different kind of monopoly that is far more dangerous even than Walmart. And we need to think about both breaking up the company and regulating it. And there's a real movement afoot now to do that, and in the process to reinvigorate antitrust overall. So the report had about 15 policy recommendations. I think that's right. Had a bunch of policy recommendations like for legislation that Congress needs to enact. And we are expecting this year to have bills reflecting every single one of those recommendations. And we're gearing up for, passing them. That's what we want to do in both the House and the Senate. And so we're going to need a lot of voices on the ground so that members of Congress and senators actually understand that there's widespread support for doing this.
Well, thank you for doing that. We'll keep our eyes open for those bills as they come through. We're going to take some audience Q&A in just a moment. Nan's going to field those. And before that, I'm going to ask you 2 final questions for myself before I say goodbye. The first one's a hard one, and the second one's a hard one, but in an easier kind of way.
Okay.
So the first one is, you highlighted a few times in our conversation the issues of inequities that have been faced. The number of businesses that have been owned by Black people or people of color closed at a disproportionate rate. Access to capital is, restricted along those social race lines. So I'm just curious if you've seen examples of what people have done to change those outcomes, to do some equity-centered work during this time. That's my first hard one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have seen quite a number of communities that, in response to COVID, in setting up local relief programs, have prioritized entrepreneurs of color. I think that's been really important to do. And I suspect that we'll see in those communities that they will recover faster economically and they'll recover more equitably. One of the problems with the approach of the PPP loans was that they were delivered through the banking system, obviously, rather than what we had advocated, which was a sort of direct cash infusion from the federal government to all businesses affected. Because they went through the banking system, there's a really uneven access. And businesses that didn't have a lending relationship with a bank were much more likely to be just left out and never actually be able to get those forgivable loans. And that meant that PPP sidelined a lot of immigrant-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and businesses owned by Black and Brown entrepreneurs. So just exacerbated the wealth inequality. So cities and towns have in some cases bridged those gaps, and we document some of those in the report that I mentioned, where they've stepped up and with their own relief programs have really prioritized, or they have, through local community organizations and others, done a lot of outreach and assistance to make sure that those federal programs are getting to businesses that need them in an equitable way. So that's been encouraging. I think moving forward, I mentioned that we've been looking at how to reform the Small Business Administration, which is an agency that's really in the spotlight because of all the PPP stuff. So I think there's a real opportunity around that. Would really love to hear from the various Main Street groups across Maine. If you have interactions with SBA, we're taking all input at this moment about people's experiences. But I think one of the recommendations that we're going to make in our report is going to be that the loan guarantee programs, there needs to be a carve out. There needs to be a substantial share of those loans that are directed to very small businesses, to rural businesses, to people of color businesses, women, that we need to, right now they're skewed in the wrong direction, and we need to just Congress needs to step in and say this much of the funding needs to go here in this direction.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I see lots of good questions coming in, so folks, please keep dropping them in while I ask one last question. And what you just said, Stacy, lines up with what I've been understanding, which part of it was getting specific, right? So that, like, disaggregating the data first and foremost, and then getting specific about how the funds were going to go out, and then thinking about those channels. So that's interesting to hear about, banks versus directly through the IRS. So here's my hard, easy question. So in the immortal words of Biddeford entrepreneur who created the shirts that say, just a kid from Maine. I know you're just a kid from Maine. And you're also a Portland kid. So what is a business that is no longer here in Portland that you miss the most?
Oh, well, that's actually, it takes me no time at all to come to an answer, which is Videoport. Videoport, I know we're all streaming now. And so there's a way in which, that it's just that the business itself is no longer relevant, but as an institution in Portland, Videoport was the best independent video store in the country. And I was traveling a lot during the mid-aughts. And so I got to test that out by going into independent video stores everywhere. And we really had the best video store, staffed by people who loved movies, and the conversations that I had in Videoport about movies. And also just as a community hub, it was like the place you could go if you'd lost track of someone and be like, hey, have you seen so-and-so? And what are they up to these days? I just love that place. And it was really, I miss it. I miss it a lot.
I do too. That's my answer as well. And somewhere as a side project, I want to do a documentary on the phenomenon of regulars. I think it's a common experience that deserves to be explored further. So maybe you and I can do that together someday. But thanks for your time today in the conversation. And I'm going to hand things over to Anne to bring some questions forward from our community here today.
Thanks, Adam. It's always so great to chat with you.
You too, Stacy. Talk soon.
Great. Thanks, Stacy. That was great. I was a fan of Videoport too. So we do have some questions here this morning, and you really do have the superpowers of analysis, as Adam said. That was a great term of endearment for you. So let's see. Our first question from Jane Palmer in Bath, one of our advisory council members, says, nice to hear your words of wisdom again, Stacy. What major changes outside of COVID since the early 2000s are you most concerned with or pleased with for small businesses in Maine specifically? And you certainly did reference the antitrust policy, but do you have anything else to add to her question?
Yeah, I mean, I will, in some ways, just say again, I guess that the thing I'm most concerned about is Amazon. Amazon increasingly controls the infrastructure for commerce. They are 50% of all online shopping, and they're over 60% of online search, meaning that people who want to buy something online are starting at Amazon rather than at a search engine. And that sets up a very difficult dynamic where, it used to be that people would go to a Google or go to another search engine and type in running shoes or a toy train or whatever it was that they were looking for, and they would get a lot of results, including for local businesses as well as Amazon in those results. When they're starting right at Amazon, it creates a very difficult challenge for independent businesses, because they have to decide, do I continue to sell online through my own website, hanging my shingle out on a road that is less and less traveled, where there's, fewer and fewer people over time who are actually even going to encounter my business that way? Or do I become a seller on Amazon? Do I become a third-party seller on Amazon's platform? And once you've done that, you really can't succeed as a seller. The way that Amazon has set it up, it's a great way for them to learn about hot new products, to steal your best ideas, to own your customers, and all the while to levy a really steep fee on your trade through the fees that it charges sellers and the huge cut of their revenue that it takes. This is very analogous to the railroads back 120 years ago. The railroads came along and were this whole new way of distributing goods, revolutionized everything. The technology was great. Online commerce has a lot of great aspects of it. It's not about the technology. in the case of the railroads, you had a handful of industrialists who gained control over the railroad lines and used that control to privilege their own businesses. Standard Oil was one example. Said, competing oil companies, sorry, you're not going to be able to get your oil to market because I own the rails and I'm just going to put Standard Oil on. That kind of thing happened in a lot of different ways. And Congress stepped in and said, look, if you own the rails, you can't have an interest in any other kind of commodity that relies on the rails. You have to be a neutral player because you're part of this core infrastructure that lots of businesses need. We need to do that with Amazon's platform. We need to take the same approach. And so that is my biggest concern because, it is through our surveys, it is the #1 threat to independent businesses in their own view. And here in Maine, we of course have no Amazon warehouses or facilities. So we're only experiencing a loss of economic activity as a result of that. And, I'm in favor of businesses being able to both sell in person and sell online and mix those two things together. But it depends on the online part of it being an open market where everyone has a chance to compete fairly and not have this powerful gatekeeper that controls it. I'm trying to think, I think I just to briefly say, and I know I'm giving a long answer here, but on the hopeful part, I think again, just to underscore, I am really more optimistic as bigger as these challenges are, the clarity with which policymakers, I didn't used to do any federal work at all because you couldn't get any traction on any of this stuff at the federal level. So our strategy was we'll work at the local level and we'll try to do what we can there. And meanwhile, there are these sort of bigger policy strategies. Now there's a lot of opportunity because there's just growing concern about all of these issues nationally and with those federal level lawmakers and so on. And so I really do think we're going to see some movement on this and that we're going to win, that we're on the upside of these issues.
Great, thank you. I love your comparison to the history of the railroad industry. It's fascinating. Question in the chat, could you talk about any early signs of increase in startup activity in Maine or elsewhere that may be fueled by the disruption of COVID? We're hearing so much about our COVIDpreneurs here and elsewhere, and we know that this disruption is not leading to increased educational enrollment like other economic downturns have. Is there any data or measurement that we can be watching to better understand whether more people are taking this chance to launch a business? And this is from Maggie Drummond-Ball at Maine Community Foundation, who has been funding the work that we get to do in our entrepreneur pilot communities.
Yeah, that's such an excellent question. We will see data eventually sort of trickle out around startups. I'm not sure that there's anything that I'm aware of that we can watch in real time, but I suspect that that's a phenomenon that's happening. And one of the reasons that I think an important focus in the coming months this year is going to be around thinking about capital and technical assistance and what is it that we can really do as a state and a set of communities to make sure that those entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs have the support they need to succeed and have the capital that they need to succeed. And so, looking at how are our community banks and credit unions doing, what are the loan funds and equity investment options that are available to independent businesses. And then I think the technical support and the know-how is also, really the other critical piece. And then as Adam, I think, rightly brought up, how do we apply like an equity lens and framework to all of that? I think is going to be absolutely critical. And I hope that state policymakers and everyone else involved in economic development is going to be focused on that.
That's great. And I'm glad to hear that. That is the work we are focusing on in those pilot projects, is really looking at their social capital, their technical assistance, and their capital, without a doubt, to create a successful ecosystem. So we'll hopefully see some more research coming out on Maggie's question. Let's see, we have time for a couple more questions, so I'm going to read you another one. So much of the focus on buying local seems to be putting the onus on individuals and individual buying behavior. With events like the pandemic, many people need to make their money go further and buy the lowest cost products. What can we do as individuals, small businesses, and nonprofits beyond our role as consumers to help push back against this anti-competitive behavior by large corporations?
Yeah, it's such a great question. You know, it's so often the, like we sort of, it feels like the onus is on us as individuals to solve these problems, and it's not on us. We the choices that we have and our ability to are really framed and determined and constrained by all of these larger forces. I think, one of the things that is important in thinking about how we change the direction of the economy is to always go to what is the thing I can do as a citizen and as a member of my community, as opposed to what I can do as a consumer. Because I don't think we're very powerful as consumers, and we don't always have the options, and we're constrained by a lot of things in terms of those choices. So I really love the framing of the question and think it's right. I do really believe that whether we succeed at the federal level around antitrust, around some of the issues around access to capital in terms of banking reform that would free up a lot more capital at the local level than we have now. Some of those big sort of structural issues that make it more of an uphill fight to reinvigorate our communities. The key to actually, there is momentum on those, and whether we're able to push them over the top and succeed in changing policy is really going to depend on whether members of Congress are actually hearing from people on the ground. If this is an issue that just sort of lives in the national newspapers and kind of lives in DC policy circles, we're not going to win. What's going to make the difference is if groups of Main Street leaders and small business owners are meeting with Susan Collins and Angus King and others and saying, here is how these changes to policies and these proposals affect us. Here's what this actually means for Maine. Letters to the editor in local newspapers, all of that kind of stuff is what's going to make the difference between whether we succeed or not on these issues.
That's great. It sounds like you've given us what we need to work on in 2021, us working with ILSR and really thinking about what we can do from an advocacy standpoint with our 25 local programs here in Maine to make sure that our federal representatives have heard us on this issue. So we look forward to that. So with that, we don't have any more time. We do have a lot of wonderful questions that we didn't get to, but I can't thank you enough, Stacy, Adam, I can't thank you enough. So we're going to close this portion of our program and wrap up. So thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. It's been so lovely to be here. And I really so much enjoyed hearing the awards and all of the great work. And I'm just grateful for everything you do and everyone who's part of this networking community. It's really terrific.
Well, thanks for your time this morning. We appreciate it. So with that, I am going to introduce Yellow Breen, who is our CEO at MDF, to share some closing comments before he tosses it back to me. So Yellow, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thanks again, Stacy. That was really provocative, evocative, informative, inspirational, depressing, as Adam said. But we appreciate having you with us and your insights. The line of the morning for me was Adam's line about how we have hard ones and hard ones that are easy, that are hard in kind of an easier kind of way. So there's hard work at the Maine Downtown Center, and then there's work that's hard but in an easier kind of way. And the same is true for all of you at the local level. It's been quite a year, and a lot of it is hard, and then occasionally there's some hard stuff that is hard in an easier kind of way. I want to I want to adapt some perspective from our inaugural poet laureate, Amanda Gorman. And I was thinking about her line, and I would say that for downtowns, all of you out there, I think, are working away in this context where our downtowns aren't broken, they're simply unfinished. And the phrase that she had about our country kind of spoke to me about our downtowns. It's been, a 50-year transition for a lot of our downtowns, and the downtown center has been privileged to be part of that marathon with you as a resource and an asset and a partner with National Main Street for the last 21, 22 years. And Amanda Gorman also said, as you know, that for there's always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And I really want to re-congratulate our 3 award winners. You guys are awesome. And Mackenzie and the Saco Scoop and the Beacon Park collaboration, you guys, were brave enough to see the light even in these challenges, and brave enough to do something about it and to be that light over this past year. And for that, we're incredibly grateful to you. And congratulations. I want to appreciate and congratulate Anne on her leadership at the Maine Downtown Center, coming up on 5 years this spring. I think if anyone epitomizes resilience and persistence and optimism, it's you, Anne, yourself, and you model that for a lot of the rest of you. And your core team here on the Downtown Center with Adam and Joe, you guys are an amazing trio. I know the whole MDF team leans in at different times around this work, Rosie, me, and others, but I just want to appreciate the 3 of you for doing it every day. I want to thank the co-chairs of our Downtown Advisory Council, Abby Levin and Jane Palmer. You guys are awesome. The volunteers on our council really keep it real for us and give us so much wisdom. And I want to thank 2 supporters without which, 2 or 3 supporters without which we could not have been doing this work over the last 5 or 10 years. One is our great friends at the State Office of Community Development at DECD. The other is our dear friend Bill King of Bath, and finally Bangor Savings Bank. There are many companies that have been with us as partners for a long time, but Bangor Savings has been first among equals over the past decade there. Bill and Office of Community Development have given us hope and resources when we most needed it across this journey over the past decade, and we wouldn't be here without you. So what sustains us all, I think, is a sense of purpose. And I would say, we at the Downtown Center this past year have derived a ton of our sense of purpose and greater mission and impact. All of MDF has derived a lot of that from the Downtown Center, because we knew with those Friday Connects and what flowed out of them in terms of supporting you in best practices locally, in holding each other up, in accessing state and federal policymakers, and on and on and on. Knowing that we could help you make a difference on the ground made us feel like we could make a difference at MDF. So in a way, we owe you for that opportunity over this past year. And then finally, I want to close seeing an amazing young African-American woman on the stage at the inauguration reminded me of the only inauguration I've attended when there was another amazing African-American woman who dominated the stage, Maya Angelou. And Maya Angelou talked in her inaugural poem 28 years ago about the rock, the river, and the tree. The rock that's the fixed point for us all to stand on, the river that moves and sings, and the tree that's both planted and yet growing and changing. And I think it speaks to what we have with downtowns. We have this unbelievable foundation. We have this constant motion of time and people and energy and the economy. And we have this rootedness and yet this ability to grow. And those things are so crucial. I think after this pandemic, we'll see that more than ever, people need those things, and they'll embrace those things, and they'll reward those things. So as Maya Angelou closed, I'd say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. And thank you to all of you, and back to you, Anne.
Thanks, Yellow. It was so awesome that you grounded us in poetry this morning. I really appreciate that. So we are doing this last thing, takes about 90 seconds of your time. We are going to transition everyone who's here to be on the camera for a quick toast with our coffee mugs. When we do it, it seems like you're being kicked out of the meeting, but you aren't. So hold on while Joanna and Robert make those transitions. And when you come back into the meeting, please turn on your camera and join us so that we can have a collective look at all of you, our downtown leaders. Thank you so much for attending our coffee, our awards, and our celebration this morning. And we did even have Roxanne Eflin all the way from Colorado, who got up very early, our former MDC director, on the Zoom call this morning. So I'm starting to see you all come in. Turn on those videos, hold up those mugs. Christina Kane Gibson, I see you, and Caribou. Thank you all. I really appreciate you this morning. MDF team couldn't have done it without you. Stacy Mitchell, our awardees, and yes, poetry. So I hope we've given you a little inspiration, and thank you for joining us. And we'd love to take a picture. So again, cheers to all of you, and thank you for coming.